Goodread Schuman is here at the Peabody Public Library on October the 8th, 2009 for the Oral History Project with Whitley County. And I am John Pontius, and thank you very much for coming here to tell your stories.
You're welcome, John.
Where were you born, and where did you live in your early years?
Well, I was born in this little village of Ormus, Indiana, on the county line with the next county. And I have always been in practically Whitley or Noble County, the southern Noble County or Whitley.
And you say it was on the county line. Did you live in the Whitley County side?
In Whitley County.
Okay.
The village of Ormus actually lays on that side of the road, but there's houses and some of the land could be touching across the river.
Okay. What all was in Ormus back then?
At that time there was a general store and a church.
Okay.
Earlier, I understand, I have one paper written by what my grandfather had told me years ago by one young girl, and they tell me at that time there had been 2 factories, which would have to be years and years back on one side of the river. I think I have those papers there yet, I'm not sure.
What do you suppose the factories made?
One of them was a glass factory of some kind, and I don't remember what the other one was.
Okay. And now, what did your father do back then?
Well, when we were there, when we moved back to Ormus, I was born. He and his brother, my father and his brother, were running the general store at the time. One lived in an apartment upstairs, one down in the building connected with the big store. If you remember anything about or have seen pictures of the general stores, they were big. They had everything in them, from black jelly beans to grandma's lye soap, wash tubs, and everything else. That was your main shopping place. You were too far out of town.
So, did you live upstairs?
The folks did it first, and then I don't know whether it was too much work. I had little brothers and sisters. Aunt Ruth had one baby, and for some reason or other, my folks moved next door to a small 4-room house over there, and that's where I was born.
Is the store still there?
No. Several years ago, I said I want to bring my camera up and take a picture of where I was born. And there was no store there. Somebody bought it and torn it down.
Okay.
About 10 years later, maybe 15, my youngest sister told her husband, I want to show you where I was born. And the little house was torn down even at that time. They went down through, and there was no store there at that time. So neither of us really could show anybody the picture where we were born.
Okay. Is the church still there?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of church is that?
It's a Baptist church.
Okay.
There's been a parsonage added on. There used to be a parsonage about a block away, and they've added a parsonage onto the church that's on there. It's still active.
Did you work in the store ever?
I was too young.
Oh, okay.
I was 10 years old when we moved there.
Okay.
The folks left there when I was about a year and a half old. Went to Loon Lake to help on the farm, and my grandfather and grandmother, they needed help, so Dad had gone back down there with them at that time. And then when I was 10, we moved back up there, he alone this time.
To Ormus. Okay. And where did you go to school early, the first school?
The first school I went to was to a little neighboring village right there, Etna.
Okay, that was just several miles away, wasn't it? In Whitley County.
Probably about 4 or 5. Okay.
Is that school still there?
No, that's been torn down now. The original school had burned. It was out in a 1-room schoolhouse. And for the first year, the Oddfellows building lodge was above the general store. I think they were in the building probably. And the kids had to go to school any way they could get there. So at that time, some of those kids should have started 1 year earlier. They were held back 1 year. And then they built a modern school that we had bathrooms in it, hot and cold running water.
In Etna?
We had 8 grades in it and 3 years of high school.
But that building is no longer there?
No, that's been down probably for 15, 20 years.
Okay. There was a church in Etna at one time too?
There still is.
And what kind of church is that?
A Methodist.
And they had a store there, I suppose?
They had a
When you were growing up?
grocery store and a lodge and a pool hall and blacksmith shop and creamery and Jones's fur buying outfit. There was a block in there that was solid on both sides with businesses.
And now, most of those places are gone, I
Yes,
suppose?
the barber shop, practically everything you might need for a little town to go to shopping and spend your time.
Okay. Did you go to Loon Lake much during your early years?
Yes.
And where did you go there?
Well, to the general area, my first years I don't remember too much. I do know the road had been changed, and at one time, before that was dredged out, the road was on top of the hill. There was no road down below because the water was up there. There's about 500 acres in that lake at that time. And we had to go in from one road or the other to go back in behind, and that's where Grandma and Grandpa had the resort up there and the log cabins.
What was their name?
Silas and Addie Goodrich.
And they had a resort.
Yeah, they had a big home. The big home is still standing on top of the hill.
Oh, is that, what side of the lake would that be?
On the south.
South side of the lake.
Most of that lake lives in areas in Noble County, but there's part of it in Whitley.
Okay.
And
Now, they drained some of the lake then,
Oh,
and made it
yes.
smaller.
it was malaria scare and this and that, so they drained it down some.
And why did they do that?
Because of the fear of probably malaria and so on.
Oh, okay.
And
Farmers then farmed the land, I suppose.
my grandparents built, I think Grandpa probably started the area up there until he married my grandmother. His first two wives had died so young.
Mhm.
And my father was the youngest of the children.
Mhm.
See, there was 10 of them in the three families all the way through. He's quite a bit younger than, I think, his sister must have been 30 years older than he was. And
Okay.
they built what they called a hotel up there. They had some rooms in it. There was a great big dining room. They had, people could dance, and they tell me there was a good many meals back there years ago when people drove the horses and buggies that she'd have wonderful chicken dinners for 25 cents or 50 cents a piece.
Mhm.
And there was 5 log cabins back in there.
For
There was
for
a grocery store at that time on top of the hill.
Okay. Oh, a different area than the...
Everything on the south side of the road right there.
Okay, and so how long did that go on with your grandfather?
I think possibly that might have been in about 1862 or 63. I'm not familiar right now with the dates. That was built back up in there. And I believe the old folks was out of there in about 1914.
Mhm.
They had sold out to somebody else.
So they were your relatives. Did you have reunions for? It was the Goodrich family.
The Goodrich family.
They had reunions back then.
That's when the first original Goodrich reunion was held out there, when it was really a large family.
Probably around 1920 or so.
Probably around 1910 or 11.
What did you do in those reunions? At those,
Well,
did
everybody.
they have entertainment or?
Oh yes, everybody's little children had to get up and speak their little recitation, and they'd have maybe some music and naturally a big feast at dinner time.
Okay.
I pick up a picture and I look at it, and you see the men with their little hats on and so on at that time, which you would never see today.
Is that reunion still going on?
There's still a piece of it, John, with the Browns and the rest of them, and you see.
Where do they, and they still meet every year, do they?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe this year on that one right there, after it was whittled down, I believe that that one was 100 and some years old this year.
Okay.
And the one that we've adopted you into right now, one little different branch of the family, all goes back to the same family originally, as you know. That one, we've had that one gone about probably 15 to 20 years.
So when you were growing up in Ormus or that area, what did you do for fun? You had some brothers and sisters.
Well, I had one sister 5 years older, one 2 years older, and then I just had a baby sister and a little brother underneath there. My
What?
one brother, after we moved up there, had drowned in that river there. So there was still several of us left.
What did the kids do back then?
Well, Ormus is, I'd say maybe a half a mile long or something like that. There were 12 houses in it. And everybody, a lot of them was widows and widowers. So everybody's grandkids would come home from towns or anything else. And it was very lively with 10 or usually all summer long, maybe 8, 10 extra children around there. What did we do? We had a wonderful time. You had a lot of playmates. I think we were all over the town. I remember one famous game. I don't know yet the name of it. I did see that in a Warsaw paper several years ago. You dug a little hole, and it would be hollowed out, and there'd be a stick put underneath there, about that much space underneath it. And a stick would be put underneath there. Then you'd have another one back here, about that long. You'd have to stand back here, and you'd have to work to, that would be a little bit limber, and flip that. Whoever could get that the farthest down there, we'd take turns doing that. Why, they won the game. Now, we had great games like that. It didn't cost anybody anything. We could play ball, where you went down the river and dug out a swimming hole.
Okay.
And we didn't have, well, you may have had a tire swing or a wooden swing under a tree or something like that. Well, you didn't have toys like that. Nothing at all. By the time evening comes, I think we were all worn out.
Okay. So, pretty happy doing that sort of thing.
2 or 3 years at that time, I think was probably in my memory as much as anything way back in there. It was wonderful.
What did the family do at Christmas time? Did you exchange gifts, or did your parents get you presents?
We always had our Christmas tree. Everybody had their socks to hang up by the fireplace or whatever you happened to have there. And Christmases weren't like they are now. I remember every year, I think every little girl was going to have a doll. And we usually had one sled for the family. Some of them don't have any at all right there because we had a lot of snowstorms.
Yeah.
And it was usually just something small in our socks. And underneath the tree was always a lot of apples. At that time, the only time of year we usually got the great big navel oranges. That was a treat.
Okay.
And different things like that. There'd be homemade candies and other things under the tree there. And they were just nice Christmases. We were thrilled with them.
Did you remember any presents that you received?
Well, yes, I always looked forward for my doll. And if there was other things, we didn't have name exchanges among the children or anything like that.
Okay.
People didn't have that kind of money.
Did you sing pretty much the same songs, Christmas songs back then?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
And practically all of us was ready to go to Sunday school on Sunday mornings at the little church out there
Where?
in Ormus.
So you went to that church. You could walk to it.
Yes.
Okay. But back then, the family, say when you were 5 or 6 years old, were they still using horses or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We lived at the store in Ormus when I started school in Etna.
Yeah.
And I think probably the first year, we had a little home when we left the lake, not very far from Ormus in Noble County. We would walk over to my aunt's house and get in a bus. I don't remember whether it was a bus, probably a car. There weren't the pretty orange buses coming down the road. There were cars, or I often think about this. My first trip to school from Ormus to Etna was on the old wooden school bus. There would be a little heater. There was a door in the back of it, one in the front, and there would be a plank seats on each side. They were cold. If they didn't put any heat, some of them, they could build a little fire underneath there somewhere or other. I don't remember that, but we rode back and forth in all kind of icy weather and everything, all that. The next year we had a school bus. Now I think it was the next 2 years I rode in an automobile. Somebody would come along and pick you up, and there'd be everybody that could get in a car. Why? That was our transportation, and finally the buses.
Okay. Now, where did you go to high school?
I went to Wolf Lake my first 3 years, and I graduated from Ligonier.
Okay. Now, Ligonier was really not much further than Columbia City, was it?
No, that's kind of in the center.
Yeah, so then you graduated at Ligonier. What did you do right after high school?
Well, I wanted to go into college of some kind. A few of us had the opportunity to. You know, we
Okay.
weren't very far into that depression at that time.
Was that pretty tough? Depression?
Yes, but you didn't realize it. Today, some of them said, "Oh, we were poor," but if we were poor, nobody knew that you were poor because we all were. Nobody
Okay.
had any money. The factories, I know one guy come back out of Toledo. He was an engineer on the railroad. They were closed down, this was, and everything else. So they all had to leave town, come back, move in with parents, or there was a lot of old houses over the country. They'd come home and patch those up and live in those because they had no place else to go. People raised great big gardens, and the women done a lot of canning.
So did you have a garden, your family?
A garden and a mammoth big truck patch.
Okay.
And it wasn't anything unusual for a larger family to have 500 or 600 quarts of fruits and
Wow.
beans, and you'd have your bags of beans, great big jars of sauerkraut in the basement. Your basements are cool. There was no refrigeration, no electricity. There wasn't that time when I graduated, but not during the Depression years.
Who worked the garden back then? Mostly the women?
The women did a lot, but the men worked on them too. They all had to.
Uh-huh. Where did they get their meat?
Well, if you were on the farm, naturally you had some
Right.
livestock. My dad had a steam engine, a separator, and a clover hauler. He had what they call a thresher's ring. All of them within so many miles around would join together. And
Okay.
so when they time to reap the crops and so on, they all had their wagons there and so on after we had the shocks of wheat and everything out. The ladies all got together in that group and they'd have to have a great big threshing dinner. Somebody had to feed all those men. And Dad on his crew had he ran the engine. No, he ran the separator man because Earl was an engineer out of Toledo, Ohio. He was laid off. He had the steam engine. I think that was made by Port Mitchell someplace or other. It was always called Old Port. I do have a picture or two of that yet. And then the clover seed hauler, so every 4th of July they pull out the day before to start in on your shocks of wheat and everything. It was really pretty when you looked out and see all those wagons out there, and here's the men with their pitchforks pitching all those bales up there and feeding them in there.
It was
But every once in a while they tried to give my dad, paid him with maybe a pig or half of a beef or something or other. We didn't have a farm.
okay.
And people didn't have the money, and I think there was more times he didn't collect on a lot of his work than what he did.
Did you make use of the grain, like to eat some of the grain in some way, like the corn or the wheat? Did you make bread out of the grain, or how was
Well,
that?
I think practically everybody that had farms would take a load of wheat into the mill in the fall. It was ground up into flour.
Okay.
I believe there was 8 great big sacks, what was it, 24, 25 pounds apiece in what they call a barrel. And of course that was stored in your homes and so on right
So your
there.
flour.
And practically all of your bread and rolls and everything was homemade
Okay.
on the old kitchen stove.
So what did you do right out of high school?
Well, my first year there was a person from Cleveland, Ohio, built a great big, the storage is still in the bank, it's no longer used,
Where?
north of Ormus, a
Okay.
little to the east there, and he came out here and raised vegetables, and they would truck those back into Cleveland to the markets and so on.
Mhm.
So Dad had a little different system. He was on that threshing and everything all summer, but he raised onions. He'd have 10 or 12 acres. He had 3 daughters out there. That was my first year on a wheel hoe. We learned to take what they call the wheel hoe and have to go down through there and
Well,
take all the weeds and everything out.
did you push it by hand, or?
Oh yes, no
Okay.
motors or anything. He would take us over about 6, 7 o'clock in the morning before he went out on the threshing rig.
Mhm.
And he would take these files and sharpen up those blades good. You'd bend over, and you didn't have tummies on you because you had to bend over to pull weeds too if there was any down there. But he'd sharpen those, and we 3 girls would have our lunch get
Did you-
too
did
hot
you-
in the daytime, and we'd go up underneath the tree, and about 4 o'clock we'd go back out again, and he'd pick us up at the end of the day. We spent a lot of time underneath the trees by the onion patch.
Okay,
And then-
so you took your lunch with you in the morning?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, because of
like,
transportation.
like what was your lunch sometimes?
I don't remember what Mom
Okay.
did pack, just what.
Like sandwiches?
Sandwich,
maybe?
oh yes.
Okay,
We did have a well back there to where we could get water.
yeah.
And
Now,
that year I decided that I was in high school. I wanted to join the 4-H club, so
Mm-hmm.
what do you suppose I was in, John?
garden,
No.
yeah.
I belonged to the potato club and the onion club.
Okay.
I had my half-acre of onions and I had my half-acre of potatoes. Of course, I'd get a little share of that if there was enough of it to go around. But that was fun. You were
Did-
with kids all over the county and you'd make your trips out around there.
Did you take some onions or potatoes to the fair?
Oh, yes.
Where was the fair?
Well, we could take it into Kendallville, or
Okay.
every fall, I remember the one church at Kimmel. We used to use the basement there, and everybody would bring in their produce and stuff down there. It was judged for your ribbons.
Okay,
And then you went on to the fair from there.
okay, and the fair would be, so it wasn't the Whitley County Fair this time, because you
This
had...
is Noble County.
Noble County, okay. And so you were in that 4-H several years. Did you take anything like cooking, like canning or baking or anything?
I took baking, some food preparation. In my first year, I went into sewing, and that was enough. Believe it or not, I can still do it. I learned to darn the toes of socks.
Okay,
We came down one time with the Whitley County group, and we met out here at Lorraine. And they gave us these old wooden nest eggs they used to have for the chickens.
yes.
Get 'em. They gave us those, and they gave us socks.
Now, what were the nest eggs for?
Didn't encourage the old hens to lay.
Okay,
They'd have the chicken coops and have all these nests down on each side here.
okay.
And you'd have a wooden, I still have one of those eggs. In fact, I guess Carol owns it today.
Your daughter,
Yeah.
okay. So where did you meet your husband?
Well, I think I was in about the 7th grade at the time. After we left Ormond in the Depression years, we went down to Troy Township in Whitley County for a year. Dad cleared land down there and had the whole thing out to onions again. And they voted in our schoolhouse, so I went along with my sister. She was a senior, and I went along with her to Larwell that day. Well, I didn't know anybody, so finally she said, let's go down to the 8th grade room, knock on the door, and see if you can visit this afternoon. Well, the kids were all pleased, and so was the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
They put me up towards the front of the room, and some pretty attractive boys in there. The one
Okay.
sitting in front kept turning around and talking to me, and the one right behind me kept punching me in the back and talking to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of liked that dark-headed one. He had real black, snappy eyes and so on. And the other was a guy I married. I kind of thought I kind of liked at that time, in the 7th grader. I would like that other one right there. I found out afterward they were cousins. They were both nice guys, though. And then I didn't see him, I don't think, until probably the junior year. I ran into him at the 4-H fair here in Columbia City one year. And then during my first year out of high school, he come pulling in up there one time. He never could find out where I lived.
Did he grow up on a farm?
Yes.
Okay.
And still on the family farm out here west, about 5 miles west of town.
So when courtship or dating back then, where would you go? What would you do?
Well, there wasn't a lot to do during those years back there. We used to have the free shows. They would come to these little Etnas and different places there. You'd take your blanket with you and your popcorn or wherever you wanted. And there'd be a big screen out right here in the open, and everybody would sit out there with their jugs of water and whatnot. We'd watch a free show.
Okay.
And even if in high school, you take back in there from the Depression year up. See, I graduated in 1936, and we were in that Depression.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of places. We've done quite a bit of swimming in the lakes and so on, like Big Lake or Loon Lake and so on. There was always good beaches. And we got together, the families at that time used to get together for parties and so on. When we lived at the store, when I was 10 years old, the old guy right across from us had an old sleigh.
Uh-huh.
And he would fill that thing full of straw, and we'd have apples and so on in there, and we'd all go out and jump in there, and that'd keep our feet warm. We'd go to some neighbors, that's when we'd have our taffy pulls and make popcorn balls, and maybe the guys would play cards.
Like neighbors and...
Everybody that could get in, neighbors and their kids.
Okay.
And they were family deals.
I suppose you knew your neighbors more back then than people do now. You had more,
Yes.
you were closer to your neighbors.
Very close. They helped each other out in case of illness or somebody being injured and so on. You would never believe how much help they came and could do for them.
Okay, so when the war came along, was your husband in the military service?
Yes.
What did he do? Where did he go and what did he do?
He was in Jacksonville, Florida, Stark, Florida,
Mm-hmm.
up to the big base down there. And they had a lot of prisoners of war down there, the German prisoners of war, the older group and the
Oh.
others too. And he'd had a hernia they didn't operate on. Got to where he flunked out and he's basing because of that, so they put him in the office. He could use a typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he was from then on through. He was an office man down there, come out as a master sergeant.
How long was he in the service? And
I believe he went in the fall of '44 and got out in just about 2 years later, in '46.
And what did you do during the service while he was gone?
Oh, this was one of those fun times, John. Carol used to say that was good for you, and I said, I'm not sure. We had taken a job on a dray truck, what they call a dray, for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And that was picking up and delivering freight.
And now, and
We hadn't been on that except about 6 months till I came in one time and I said, greetings. I knew what that letter was. It was a letter from Uncle Sam. We want you. So what could he do?
Going back a ways, did you drive the truck or what were you doing?
Yes, I learned to drive a truck before that. Because
Okay.
did you ever know what marl was in the lakes? That white, there would be up close to the shores and,
A kind of soil?
yes.
Okay.
That made a wonderful fertilizer for the fields. And the government made an allotment for people to go in and haul that out and spread it on their fields. Well, Errol decided to make a marl spreader. His buddy that he was
That's
raised...
your husband, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
His buddy decided that he was going to come up and help him on it. But they lacked one thing when they got it done. He had the contract for it. We didn't have a driver. And who do you suppose was elected? And I had never driven even a car.
Was it tough to learn? Or?
Well, it wasn't easy.
Okay.
Yet, you had to go around those fields slow, and he had built it so there was a fan on the back and they could shovel that down in. It was sloped, and there was a fan that would throw that all over the fields. Well, I'd start to shift gears and I'd stop it. I got so mad that one day and I gunned it, threw them both off the truck on the back end. So around the field I'd go and come back and picked them up. They never said a word. But it was something different to go from one gear to the other. I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to driving.
Was it unusual for a woman to do that?
Well, pretty much so.
Okay.
But after all, you had to make a living.
Yes. And so you heard from the government then, and they wanted you.
No, they didn't want me. They wanted him.
They wanted him.
No, it was a few years later.
Yeah.
And we had taken this contract with the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Okay.
We'd had it about 6 months, and here comes a letter from the government. And he was working out there that day building a bigger rack on the back of the old truck.
Mhm.
And I said, what are we going to do with this? So Mr. Senninger was an agent here. He said, Billy, I think you could run that. And I said, but I don't think I should. Well, John, you have 2 small children there. And one of them was about 4, or about 6, and the other about 8. What you going to do? You're going to try to... Well, Carol hadn't started school yet. So I thought, I'll try that. I've seen times when we had 6 freight cars. Now, there was a truck came in over here every day with freight.
Mhm.
Put them in the old terminal. You've seen pictures around here of the old terminal. And rat-infested place. And then later years, they built the other one. And there would be as high, they'd come in the morning with a big semi-load. In the evening, they'd come back through and pick up, say we'd go down to Bluebell and pick up their bales of overalls, and we'd go out to Weatherhead and pick up a lot of stuff
So
up.
you drove?
Yep, you'd take it back, go out and drive, and
Okay.
we would take it back over there.
Would you do any of the lifting or work?
Oh, I could use one of those two-wheel trailers. I didn't have.
Okay.
That's where I got a broken nose, John. That one time, do you remember Oriental Show You?
Yes. Shinzuoki.
That was all shipped in here, you know, from where Susie's at molasses.
Okay.
And I think those barrels weighed about 1,000 pounds. And one guy from Weatherhead, I had to have some extra help. Some of it I could not do. I could not
Okay.
lift. And he was helping me. He said, Billie, when I put my foot on this wheel to pull and break this back, can you help me? And I said, yeah. About that time it broke loose and he brought his elbow right back in here on my nose, broke it. And I had a pretty rough time of it there for a little while. Didn't go to the doctor or anything because I had to get back on that truck. But I've seen many a time when we would have as high as 5 or 6 loads of freight in freight cars over there. We'd have to break the seal, sort all that out and break it. Mr. Senator, half the time, he was like me, he was old enough to be my dad. He would send the young guy in the office over to help me over there or help load. He'd say, Billie, learn this trade in here. Well, I did pretty much. He wanted me to go to Ohio and go to school and come in the office, but I didn't have any choice in where I was going to be. I would have been in Ohio in every place. And then again, with 2 children, you don't do that.
Okay. While you were working there, where were your children?
Oh, I had,
Was that a problem?
when he first went into service, my mother had him quite a bit when we were hauling
Okay.
marl. And when he first went into service, why, I had an old lady that never had any children. And I was a cream of the crop for her. And so was my children. So she was probably about 74, 75. Crippled up quite a little bit, but she come and lived with me there for a while. The kids just loved her, both of them. And then my sister kept him part-time. One day I lost my son. She called and said, Mother, he stepped out the door. Nice snowy day. I thought, where am I? Town in Columbia City? Where in the world could that kid be? He still had his little top coat on. He left her house and I found him down in Schultz's 5 and 10 cent store. I think he was 4 years old at the time, wandering around. One of the trucks in there recognized him. He used to ride the truck with me part-time if I didn't have somebody. By this time, my daughter was in kindergarten, so that took care of her.
So did you and your husband have another business in Columbia City?
Yes, in 1949, in December, when he was in service in Florida, he learned to bowl. And their bowling alleys there, they had there weren't too many around, and they had cement poured on the ground, and they would fix it, fix it for their alleys, and put a big tent over it. That's where he learned to bowl. Well, he fell in love with bowling, and he was a good bowler. So he come back and going to put in a bowling alley. Built his own building and everything. And we
Where
opened
was
up
this?
On the end of West Market.
In Columbia City? Okay.
And he had a few borrowed money, and he had a few pretty strong men to help do it.
Yeah.
They started that in the spring, and I think we opened up in December of '49. And what do you suppose that happened to me, John? That was when he joined the reserves when he got out of the Army. He joined the reserves, picked up the paper and see where the whole group from Fort Wayne had been volunteered. Whoever ran a bowling alley, I never did, but I learned to do it.
So did he go
He had to go.
to where?
He was up in Wisconsin at that time.
Okay.
And so here I am again with 2 children and trying to keep them going and trying to keep that place going too. And I learned how to clean the alleys proper, how to do this and that.
Did
And
your children help sometimes later on? Or?
Carol did later on, and she worked the counter in the snack bar a lot.
Okay. Was it a pretty good business?
Yeah, when we first opened up, and then we'd only been open about 2 years when the other one decided there was money in it, so they would put in a bigger one.
Okay. In Columbia City?
So that kind of
Okay.
hurt.
You had some competition there.
Yes.
Okay. But did you enjoy doing all that? It was a A lot of long hours and,
Personally, no. It was long hours, and by the time you go down and clean in the morning, and when we first opened up, we were open a lot of hours. You never had a Saturday or a Sunday to yourself or anything.
okay.
And I think I was glad when I left there. My mother-in-law was sick, and I went out to the farm to start remodeling the house and taking her out of the nursing home.
Okay.
And
What farm was that? And where was that?
that's still one that we still own out 5 miles west of Columbia City.
West of Columbia City. Okay.
It belongs now to the 2 children that would have it in the tail end anyway, so I got tired of repairing houses and this and that, and took care of that about 4 or 5 years ago for them.
Now, you were related to the Adair family, is that correct?
Yes.
And, for example, was there some pretty well-known Adairs around?
Yes, there were.
For example, who?
Well, we had, I don't remember his first name right now, Judge Adair was here, first he was in Albion, and then he had offices here. I think that was the second or third judge we had right here.
Now, did you know him?
No, that was really before my time. I
Okay.
knew his son-in-law and part of his family.
Okay.
I think Dad's oldest sister, some of the family married back and forth between them. Of course, that was 2 different families right there.
So, when you were growing up in Ormus and around Etna, were there any memorable events or tragedies or anything that stick out in your mind? Anything unusual that happened around?
No, I don't
at
think
that
too much
time?
right there.
It was a pretty quiet life.
I remember, I don't remember what years it was, right back in there when I came into Columbia City one time with my father. And what we called at that time the Big Lake Road, 109.
Okay.
That was all sand. They were just getting ready to try to get in there, and that was all just sand you were driving through and so on. We didn't have those improved roads.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to all this?
Well, I think that a lot of it explains my cheerful life growing up, John.
You're talking about a cheerful life.
I was glad when all of a sudden we opened up the bowling alley and we needed a part real bad for the automatic. Yes, I did set pins in a bowling alley too, John. I didn't have pin boys that one day, and I had an afternoon league, and my sister and I went back, and that was one and only time. That was hard work, because when we first put that in, those all had to be hand spotted. And then we got the automatics after that. But I'm not quite sure it was that thrilling for me. But then we needed a part for one of the machines one day, and I could call Cleveland the next morning, it would be here on one of the freight trucks out here. So he went out there that one day and said, my wife used to do this type of work. Boss out there was typing and so on, a lot. And about 2 or 3 days later, a strange gentleman came up to me and said, I hear you used to work with the Pennsylvania Railroad on freight and so on. I said, yes, I did. And he said, would you be interested in a job? And I said, no, I've had enough. Well, he said, come out and talk to me. So I ended up out there for 23 years afterward. That was my final one.
Now, when you were operating the bowling alley, can you remember some of the stores that where did you buy your groceries and clothes at that time?
You're good for it when you did shopping, but at that time Columbia City had a lot of nice little shops. We had about 3 or 4 dress shops right on the main street of town here.
Like what?
And we had about 4 drug stores. We had several grocery stores right here. Quite a bunch of them. Some of them have been here for years and years.
Can you remember where you went?
Well, I think I went to Wine Coops used to have good meat.
And where was that?
That was on the north side of the 200 block.
Okay.
There was 2 grocery stores there at the time. Hudson Hallar, I think, was one of the first ones right up there on the corner of Main and Van Buren.
This was probably in the 1950s? Okay.
But we had a lot of grocery stores and drug stores and everything else here at that time. Columbia City was a good little shopping town. You
Okay.
come in town on Saturday night, there's no place to park. People would come in, they'd leave their car doors open, and they'd just visit and visit.
Saturday night was the big shopping night back
That was a
then.
big shopping night, and everybody come to town.
Did they have things going on downtown on Saturday nights ever?
I don't think. It was, they just got together, that would be in the 40s and 30s and 40s and so on up in through there.
Okay. Do you remember Old Settlers much going on back then?
Yes, I do.
And what did they do back in 40s and 50s for Old Settlers?
Well, from the time I was a kid on, I nearly always came into Old Settlers with my uncle and aunt. They had a daughter about my age,
And who were they?
Novi and Eileen Humbarger.
Okay,
That Max Gandy was their son-in-law.
okay. Who was the principal of the high school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And I used to entertain June when we come in, and you were given a whole 50 cents to spend. You could do anything at 50 cents at that time. There was a free show every time for you.
okay.
And you could do most anything with that. But Uncle Nove always had a little extra money, so I'd get another 50 cents off him.
Who was this?
My Uncle Nove Humbarger.
Okay, okay. And what would you do? Would you get something to eat?
People used to carry blankets with them, and you'd spread, in the early years, you'd spread your blanket right on the courthouse lawn, and you'd take your lunch with you.
Okay.
There was always church stands and everything else downtown with food.
Did they have entertainment of any kind?
Well, that's when you had the good entertainment. We had the place there on the courthouse lawn that there would be, you could have seals, train skills. Hard telling, you never knew what kind of the entertainment. But the main thing would be the high wire acts in the afternoon and evening.
Okay, around the courthouse square
Yes.
area?
Usually right on South Main Street, right in there, that first block.
Did they ever have parades in Columbia City? Remember parades back then?
I remember when the circuses used to come to town, one of the bigger circuses, and there was always a big parade on that, come from outside of town. They would have a lot of elephants and everything you could think of, and the calliopes, and that's when I was pretty small.
Okay.
I remember that.
And then I suppose they would have a big tent and
Oh, yes.
and have the circus.
Three ring.
And the whole town would come and
So people didn't lack for entertainment too much because a lot of it you made on your own.
okay. So when you were at the bowling alley, when you had that, what else was there to do around Columbia City, and for fun or entertainment?
There wasn't too much.
Okay, because you were busy a lot.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Billie, thank you very much for coming and sharing your life and your stories.
To me, my mother or my daughter says, "You've had an exciting life." And I don't feel that I have. I think a lot of it was hard work, which I guess didn't hurt me too much, John.
Okay.
Because there's not many people today my age that can do what I can and keep going. And even up to my sanity, as I tell everybody, I'm sane most of the time. And she thinks it's wonderful that I can remember back as far as I can.
Well, you're very lucky. You're a very lucky woman. Thank you.
I don't have any canes or any wheelchairs or anything yet, or walkers, so.
Okay, thank you.